See, firstly, I want to pay tribute to all those victims of terrorism of 26/11, 2008. It was one of the worst terrorist attacks that we had. A lot of innocent lives, including foreigners, were killed. And it was the most brazen terrorist attack at a time when India was trying to establish a peaceful relationship with Pakistan. So it came as a big blow to the normalization process. So when we were beginning to analyze the patterns of terrorism in India, in our organization in NatStrat, we discovered that there is a consistent pattern of behavior from Pakistan, and that can be traced back to 1947. So the findings indicate that, number one, that it is a consistent behavior. It has been driven by the military or the ISI over the last 75-80 years. The characteristics are to hurt India, to use its vulnerabilities, to create communal disharmony, to create a sense of fear and panic, and to do all this with deniability. To say that I am not involved in it, someone else has done it, or it is India's internal problem. Starting from October 1947, the so-called tribal invasion, within 3 months of the independence, when the tribals invaded Jammu and Kashmir, we realized, and this is now given an account by a Pakistani general himself, they were not tribals, they were Pakistani regulars that were disguised as tribals and invaded Kashmir. That is how India went to the United Nations, saying that Kashmir has been invaded. After that, we divided, so that was the first point. Then we divided the whole 80-year period into 5 phases. So we found the first phase from 47 to 71. That included the whole era and the decade of the Khalistani movement. Because in the 80s, it was the Khalistani movement that petered out by 93 or 94. That is when the Kashmir movement began. It began in 1989 but picked up in the 90s, mid-90s, late 90s. And then leading up right up to the parliament attack. And the next phase we have concluded was from 2001 to approximately 2008, which was a series of attacks culminating in Mumbai. And the next phase, of course, begins after that, going up to this current time of Pahalgam. And we find that the pattern has been very much the same. Same organizations, Jaish-e-Mohammed, Lashkar-e-Taiba, and in between, of course, we also saw, by the way, the hijacking of IC-814. We saw the devastating attack on the Indian embassy in Kabul. So when we look at and we probe and we try to research, then we find that there is a very sophisticated network of actors and strategy to hurt and to harm India. And this has been carried out using different fault lines within India. For example, the Khalistani movement or the Kashmir issue or the Hindu-Muslim question. So wherever there is a opportunity, it is used. And some of the attacks have been diabolical, major attacks. For example, when you talk of subterfuge and deceit, apart from the tribal invasion of October 1947, the Kargil War of 1999 was exactly the same. There was deniability. No, we were not involved. These were the locals. But when the research is done, then they also admit. Finally, the truth comes out. The other finding we have is that all of these attempts have been unsuccessful in achieving their objective of creating damage to India or hurting India. They have not succeeded. So attempts are being made repeatedly every few years to set us back. But these attempts are not succeeding.
Which list we know 26/11 hijacking? If you can mention, lesser known, but it was.
You see, when we were doing the research, some of our young research assistants were doing the research. I found that many of them were not even aware of some of the attacks and some of the attacks or the blasts etc., that had taken place in the 80s and the 90s. So it was very important for us to bring this up, this information, to the knowledge of the current generation of the young Indians. So the whole, for example, the whole operation on the Khalistan movement, which began in the 80s, reached its peak and then petered out towards the early 90s, was something which not everyone is aware of. People have forgotten because the situation in Punjab has changed. So people have forgotten what actually happened at that time. That time the Soviets had invaded Afghanistan. Pakistan was a frontline state. The US, CIA and the Pakistani ISI were working closely together to defeat the Soviets in Afghanistan. The ISI was given the freedom to also open up the front with India so as to keep Punjab unstable, destabilized, so that they could focus their entire energies on the Western Front with Afghanistan. And the kind of attacks that took place, the brutal killings in buses and trains of Hindus and to create a Hindu-Sikh divide, all of that was part and parcel of a strategy. Now, people have a vague memory of what happened, but the modus operandi used was very brutal. Today, we jumped to today, and we have a small section there about the seriousness of narco-terrorism, which is the new form of terrorism, which people in India are not fully aware about, where drugs and narcotics are coming in through drones and other methods across the border from Pakistan. Again, the idea is to use a different weapon to weaken the society and to destabilize the country. Very interesting. You see, the Indian response has been very different. Initially, what is the first such illegal action by Pakistan, which today will never be accepted, was the invasion of Kashmir in October 1947. The Indian response at that time was to take the matter and appeal to the United Nations, to say that, look, India has been invaded, please help, or please tell Pakistan to stop the invasion. That was the first response. And that is how the Kashmir issue went and continues to be in the United Nations. That was one extreme response. Second response over time we saw was basically limited to diplomatic response. If there was a terrorist attack, India would use only diplomatic means against Pakistan or raise the issue in international forums. That we would go either to the United Nations or we would go to other capitals and inform them about what has happened, the evidence that we had against Pakistan. That was another form of response. Third form was later on as we moved. In 2001, for example, after the Parliament attack, we launched Operation Parakram. So for more than 1 year, Indian forces were on alert along the border, but were not used. So that was the doctrine of threat of use of force we applied on Pakistan, that we are ready to give you a military response if you do not stop further terrorism. In 1999, of course, we went out on a full-scale military aggression and counter-response to Pakistan. As time progressed, our responses became more and more hard, even from a diplomatic point of view. So, for example, till a few years ago, we then took recourse to the Financial Action Task Force, the FATF, where we said Pakistan must be put on the blacklist for financing terror. Prior to that, what we did was, after the 2001 September 9/11 attacks in New York, and after that, when the United States announced that we are fighting a war against terrorism, after that what happened is, we went to the Security Council, to the United Nations, and proscribed many, more than 50, if I remember correctly, Pakistani entities were listed in the Security Council resolutions on terrorism. Either entities or organizations or individuals, all Pakistan based. So they were sanctioned, they were proscribed. Pakistan was told you have a legal obligation to either arrest or to stop this activity. And then we find a big change in the doctrine, starting from the 2019 Pulwama bus attack on the CRPF, when we launched strikes against Balakot, against the terror camp there. And of course, culminating now, this year in May, in the Pahalgam attack and Operation Sindoor. So we see a full spectrum and an evolution of India's response to Pakistani terrorism. Today, we are at a juncture which we have never had before in our history, where we have openly declared that if there is terrorism from Pakistan, we will treat it as an act of war, and we reserve the right to hit back at anyone who has originated the terrorist attack or their patrons. So this is where we are today. Pakistan will follow all the tricks of the trade that they know, because our study shows that in 80 years, they have come to the conclusion that such strategies of using terror with deniability and through organizations which they can disown has, from their point of view, kept India in check. If that is the conclusion they have drawn, then we should also assume that after Sindoor, they will relocate their terrorist hideouts, their terrorist camps. They will use new methodologies. They will use new technologies. I believe our people are prepared and anticipate, and we understand the strategies, the modalities, and we will respond accordingly. After all, if they are also going to change their tactics, our tactics will also change. They will not remain static. So this is all a dynamic situation.
My last question, sir.
You see, after Kargil, there was a full report submitted on internal security reform. Many of those recommendations were implemented, but it took a long time. It is under the current government of Prime Minister Modi that many of the recommendations have finally been implemented. Similarly, I think we have drawn lessons from 2019 Pulwama and 2025 Pahalgam. Those lessons must be internalized. They must be implemented. We must have synergy among all our internal agencies. We must improve our intelligence capabilities to prevent such attacks in the future. And we must also simultaneously address any of the problems that are existing within India, which we are doing. After all, Article 370 revocation in Kashmir, from that time till today, the fact is that your tourism industry boomed in Kashmir, which is why Pahalgam happened, because someone was not happy with the success. So I would say, beef up your internal coordination among all your security agencies, beef up your intelligence agencies and apparatus to prevent, detect, and to neutralize any attack before it takes place. And lastly, I would say, address your internal problems to the extent that you can, so as to remove any reasons for anyone to try and do any mischief with India. So be alert all the time and use the best technologies to secure yourself.